Welcome. This is Truth Serum, where the Doctor of Truth is always in. I'm your host, Gerald Harrison, giving you a shot of truth in the sea of lies that we call the news media. Once again, want to go ahead and let you know that we are now on VLR, Vigilant Liberty Radio, being simulcast on OTN. Hopefully you can go ahead and join us. Wanted to go ahead and just kind of jump on into this. As we all know, that we had some people that were arrested last week, and so one of those that were arrested was State Senator, Leland Yee of San Francisco, and he'd been arrested on corruption and, wait for it, weapons trafficking charges. Now, this is the same guy who was quoted as saying, quote, "No one will convince me that there is anything other than a joke to say that there are multiple clips," meaning magazines, "and semi-automatic weapons that can shoot 100 or more bullets at a time." Does it sound like anyone you know, like Kevin DeLeon? Is necessary in this state or in this country? It's ridiculous. Now, this is a direct quote from a state senator who wanted to go out here and try to restrict the Second Amendment, kind of like a Chris Christie light, if you will. Now, according to Independent Journal Review, you know, that neighborhood paper that Rush Limbaugh talks about, but gets more web traffic than CNN.com, you know, that particular paper, Leland Yee was caught on tape saying to an undercover FBI agent that he can get weapons, assuming that they're fully automatic, from Russia through Newark or New Jersey, Chris Christie, anyone, and supply them to whoever he wanted. Now, Taylor, why don't we go ahead and roll that clip?
Senator Yee's office is also being searched at the state capitol today, and that's where we find Case Area 3's David Bienick live with what unfolded during today's search. David, what do we know so far?
We're live on the fourth floor of the state capitol, and as you may be able to see, a CHP officer stands guard outside of room 4072. This is Senator Leland Yee's state capitol office. This office has been guarded and roped off since at least 7 o'clock this morning. We saw at least 7 people go inside. We've been able to confirm that at least some of them are federal agents. Now, about 15 minutes ago, some of those agents left with boxes and carts and bags of what we presume is evidence. As they were leaving, I counted 9 boxes and cases and 1 paper bag, including some of the boxes that had to be carted away. They went down a state capitol hallway, rounded a corner, and into an elevator where they disappeared out of sight. I should say that we have seen no evidence of anyone in custody or arrested here at Senator Yee's office at the state capitol. Leticia?
And David, what is Senator Yee best known for at the state capitol as far as his leadership role there?
Yeah, Senator Yee a few years ago made headlines in his crusade against violent video games. More recently, however, though, he has been known as an advocate for transparency in government. In fact, just last week he received an award from a group of journalists for his transparency efforts. And as you mentioned, he is a candidate for Secretary of State, one of several candidates running for that position, and has made his crusade for transparency part of his campaign.
And David, has there been any reaction yet from the Senate on the leadership there on what they're saying so far about today's arrest as well as the raid?
Yeah, in a word, no. The Senate and the senators and their staff have been quite mum this morning. Senate leader, Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg did have a media gathering scheduled for this morning where presumably he was going to talk about other topics. That has now been rescheduled until sometime this afternoon. Senator Yee does serve as chair of the Health and Human Services Committee in the state Senate, but that committee is not scheduled to meet today.
Thanks so much, David, for that update.
Wow, that's pretty interesting story. Now, with me is my producer, Taylor Miller, And Becca Lower. Say hi to everyone at Truth Serum, Becca.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Gerald.
Okay. Question: what did you guys being out of state? What do you guys think of this type of a story? Either one of you.
Well, what I think of the story, it's a national story. This is not. This is definitely out there in the new media. But the story to me is the fact that CNN has not covered this. Now, I haven't watched CNN or checked the Twitters today, but I don't believe that they are covering the Leland Yee story.
Well, I
they're
think
busy looking for the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because they wanted to leave the serious news to people like at Kyle Becker at IAJ Review.
That's right.
Just saying.
They're being nice.
After all, he does get more web traffic than CNN.com.
That's right. I love that. I am so proud. I mean, he put some statistics, just really briefly. I mean, Kyle shared some statistics on Twitter earlier or last night, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, they're getting millions, tens of millions of hits every week. I could not be happier for them over there.
Absolutely.
They do great work.
They do absolutely wonderful work. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of interesting that a state senator who is as big of an anti-gun person on the state level as Dianne Feinstein is on the national level, gets busted for weapons trafficking.
Definitely. Did you see also, this is something I was doing a little research yesterday, he won something like Legislator of the Year from a social justice organization there in California, and I'm trying to find the link.
Actually, I think it was a journalist. It was a journalist organization.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It was a journalist organization that he won an award for right before he got busted. For now, get this. He won it for, hold on to your seatbelts, transparency in government.
Wow.
This is what Leland Yee, notorious arms dealer, won an award for.
I think the best part of this, though, is if you take a look at CNN and actually do a search for for Leland Yee, and you do CNN stories, all CNN results, the top one says violent video game bill. California Senator Leland Yee discusses a bill to help prevent children from having access to violent video games. This is the famous bill that also got struck down by the Supreme Court because it, was First Amendment restriction. It made it a criminal. It made it a crime to sell a violent video game to a kid.
Right.
The next one there is California bill could give juveniles in prison for life a second chance. Then another one, trash document outlines alleged perks for Palin. Then another one, shark fin soup, one step closer to being banned in California. These are from 2010, 2011, 2010, 2011. What do we see wrong here?
And this is you're doing a search on CNN.com as to what they have regarding Leland Yee.
Yeah. You go to MSNBC.com. The only story that I found on it was something from, actually I found 3 stories on Leland Yee at MSNBC.com. The first one is from 2012. Colorado shooting prompts gun bills in big states. The second one, legislature from 2013, legislators, quote-unquote, hunted with threats from pro-gun activists. Then from last week, a rough week on the political corruption front. This is how it starts. For a while, it seemed like the number of Republican officials caught up in various scandals, some ethical, some criminal, some just ugly, was growing at an alarming clip. Over the course of several weeks, controversies of various degrees of serious surrounded Chris Christie, Bob McDonnell, Trey Radel, Michael Grimm, Scott Walker. I forget a Scott Walker scandal. Maybe I just missed it. Pat McCrory and others. It's apparently Democrats' turn now. Starts off with Charlotte Mayor Patrick Cannon being arrested for corruption.
Oh, we'll get into that in a moment.
Yeah. Then it goes to Gordon D. Fox in Rhode Island. Then it goes to Bill Scarborough. And then it mentions Leland Yee. And that's all. So MSNBC, CNN, that's all they mention. Whereas if you look at the indictment against Yee, that's a movie waiting to happen.
Absolutely. Especially when you have someone that's a sidekick of Leland Yee going by the name of Raymond Shrimp Boy Chow.
A reformed criminal, supposedly.
Shrimp Boy.
Somebody.
It's never a good sign when somebody has a nickname.
If he's a reformed criminal, the Reformation didn't take place. Because now, like I said, now you're dealing with an arms dealer. Now, the funniest thing when I've gone out here and I researched the story and I kind of, I researched it and I found out that Leland Yee said this, got this on tape, because this is a quote when I mentioned it. It was on tape from an undercover FBI agent that he can get Russian arms through New Jersey, of all places, and then be able to give them to whomever he chooses. The story says that the FBI, undercover FBI agent, has this on tape, which you can actually find that quote at ijreview.com or igr.com. Anyway, the bottom line is simply this: how is it that one of the biggest opponents or the biggest proponents of gun control is now being indicted on weapons charges? Not just weapons charges, but arms smuggling.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a pea shooter and a 22. We're talking about shoulder launched rockets and automatic Russian weapons. Stuff that no American citizen, no legally law-abiding American citizens can't even get their hands on.
Right.
You can't get your hands on a rocket launcher. Now, what is Leland and Shrimp Boy moving stuff through Chris Christie's house, saying that they can go through anything they can go ahead and distribute this to anything they want? What are they doing with Russian arms? This is true serum, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. Yeah.
This is true serum. Well, why are we doing? We should be outraged.
CNN should be outraged.
Well, I don't even know if CNN should be outraged, because you'd have to be able to be a journalist to do that, and we know that They don't have those because all you have to do is
Except
look
for
at
Jake Tapper.
Thank you very much.
All you have to do is look at Piers Morgan. So I got
former CNN host.
Former CNN host, yeah, that's right.
Okay, because anybody who would hire Piers Morgan as a host for a journalistic show obviously doesn't think anything about journalism. But then again, you know, you kind of lump them with MSNBC hiring Al Sharpton.
Yes.
I mean, I would say a 5-year-old could do better than Al Sharpton. And make more sense, by the way. And racism wouldn't even enter the picture.
It would absolutely make more sense.
But moving on. Once again, from the Independent Journal Review, Patrick Cannon, who was the mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I say he was the mayor because he was arrested on receiving a $20,000 bribe, and he resigned that night. And it was after allegations that he had an illicit trip to Las Vegas to which included payoff negotiations at the Capitol Grill restaurant. Now, if Mr. Cannon is convicted on all counts, he could be facing 50 years, 50, in prison, and a $1 million fine. $1.5 million fine. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the wild part about Patrick Cannon. Grew up in the projects, you know, local boy makes good, rises through the political ranks. He becomes a Democratic star of mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. But it's the kind of stuff where you have to ask a question. Why is it that these type of things are going on? And it would have to point to some type of a lost moral compass. Yeah. And then that's where you have the people like at the Southern Poverty Law Center, for example, or People for the American Way, or Citizens United talk about, oh, separation of church and state. What are you talking about? Blah, 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 blah. Let me just go out here and just say, if that's the case of separation of church and state, in order for you to make that claim, you would now have to go back to the original intent of when the state was created. Because you can't make a claim of separation if that's not what the founders of the state intended. Now, I happen to look up the preamble to the Constitution of the state of North Carolina. And this is what it says, quote, "We, the people of the state of North Carolina, grateful to Almighty God, the sovereign ruler of nations, for the preservation of the American Union and the existence of our civil, political, and religious liberties, and acknowledge our dependence upon Him for the continuance of those blessings to us and our posterity, due more certain security thereof, and for the better government of this state, ordain and establish this Constitution." Does it sound like somebody was trying to get away from religion? Help me out, somebody.
No, I don't think so.
What do you think, Taylor? Am I just completely like Ricky Henderson and just way off base here? I mean,
I don't know. Ricky Henderson did a nice job at stealing bases.
Well, he had to be off of it.
He was way off. He was way off in order to steal those bases, though. I caught the analogy.
My opinion is a very strange opinion. Part of it is because I admit to being not saying that anyone here isn't a student of history. I graduated with a history degree. from the college that I went to here in Texas. And I am actually in favor of separation of church and state. However, it is not because I believe that the church will corrupt the government and say, oh, how dare, and start, legislating by moral decree.
Yeah, in other words, a theocracy.
Yeah. I am for separation of church and state because I don't want the government corrupting religion. And all I have to do, the best answer of that is you can either look at the Church of England,
Correct.
Or you can go, and to my Episcopalian and Anglican friends out there, I apologize, or you can go back and you can look at the Holy Roman Empire.
Right. And the difference between separation of church and state versus the theocracy is simply this. What you are saying, Taylor, and what you're believing is correct, because that is precisely what the pastor of the Danbury Baptist Church said in Danbury, Connecticut, writing a letter to Thomas Jefferson, saying that is the state going to get into the affairs of the church? And he's saying, no, there's a wall of separation there that the state will not get into the affairs of the church, but not the other way around. And the reason why that is because in order for government to function correctly, you have to have a moral compass. The question is, where does that moral compass come from? If it comes from something other than what we understand as Holy Writ, there's a problem. That doesn't mean, and I would say this again, that doesn't mean that I am in favor of a theocracy. As a matter of fact, for the record, I would go out here and run on your back, leap over your shoulders, and knock the snot out of somebody who would even want a theocracy. A theocracy is not what this country is about. This country is about religious freedom. You worship God as you choose to. The state does not have a right to tell you how to do it.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have a right to tell you that someone else's religion can impose on your religion.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Which goes into my next story of Hobby Lobby. Now, Hobby Lobby, as we all know, is being grilled by the media as well as public opinion about having a war on women and having these, why can't you stay out of my bedroom, Hobby Lobby type of responses. The only problem is, as usual, liberals don't know the truth. The truth is, there are 20 known FDA-approved methods of contraception that are on the market in the United States today. Hobby Lobby provides at little or no additional cost to its own employees, all 22,000 of them, 16 of the 20. We are talking about 4 methods of contraception that are abortion-induced.
5%.
That's it. That is all this whole thing is all about. And you notice that the left, and even to a certain degree the right, don't talk about either one of them. They don't talk about the fact that Hobby Lobby offers 16 out of the 20. Nobody talks about it. The right looks at it as an invasion of religious freedom, which it is. But they don't get into the fact that saying, hey, libs, hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on. Do you understand? They don't offer 4, but what about the other 16?
And the right needs to get better about that, because you can't just blanket statement say religious liberty. That freaks some people out. People don't understand what that means. And so I'm happy to see these statistics. I didn't know, honestly, I personally did not know until probably 2 days ago. I saw it in an article about the, so there's a failing on our side.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There is a definite disconnect, because somebody is trying to go out here on the left. Well, we obviously understand what the left is doing, but on the right, what we don't want to do is we don't want to connect our political freedom with our religious freedom. We want to try to make that connection as loose and as nebulous as possible.
What do you think, Taylor?
I think one of the issues that there is with folks when discussing religious freedom is that immediately people think, oh, that means that you're just going to yell and scream at me whether you're on the street corner or not. And that's something which people need to consider differently. You have too many people out there who, and there's nothing wrong with street preaching. However, one thing that the Bible does say, and Jesus does say, and again, I'm talking from a religious standpoint. What Jesus does say in the Bible is that we are to be as innocent as doves and as shrewd as a snake. And I'm not sure that street preaching is being as shrewd as a snake.
Well, street preaching for those that are called to it, because not everyone is called to that type of a venue.
Right.
Street preaching is something that you have to be called to by God Himself, and not everybody's doing it, but it has its roots going back where? Going back to even in the public square that we were, the town crier, if you will. Right. Even though there was a church that was in the center of town, which had a steeple, which the steeple, by the way, was a tribute to God, being that it was the highest point in the town, which means that God had preeminence over the town. Even though that is true, the town crier still had a responsibility to not only go out here and preach whatever news there was, but also to go ahead and bring forth biblical truth. And like I said, street preaching is something that I personally would not do, but I would defend people's right to be able to do it. What do you say, Taylor?
I agree. I agree. There may be confrontations between brothers, which happen in love on the smartness of it. But I think that sometimes you sit there and you listen, and sometimes folks will answer questions, and then we'll ask questions, and it'll be a good discussion. And sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, the thing for me though is I see there's a place for that. I see there's a place for a street preacher, but there are people even that I would say are libertarians or conservatives that are not social conservatives that don't understand that a lot of sort of social conservatives it's a stereotype. Not everyone that's a social conservative is going to be, I don't think critical is even the right word. Everybody's a Bible beating, going to not be able to have a conversation with you, and I think that is part of the obstacle that we have on the right, is trying to explain to people that that isn't the case, if that makes sense, and especially on this issue, that they're going to assume that that they're not going to be able to, that they assume the worst. They assume that you don't agree with them if they're somewhat more liberal socially, when that isn't the case. It's just 4 things.
Yeah, and regarding even conservatism, I think the ones who feel threatened the most are the fiscal conservatives, because those who are fiscally conservative, which in my opinion I don't really think that kind of a label exists, because if you're fiscally conservative, then you're socially liberal, which means you're not a conservative at all, because your conservatism has to come out of a belief system. It doesn't come out of your politics. Your belief system, your politics doesn't come out of your belief system doesn't come out of your politics. Your politics comes out of your belief system.
Well, there might be a misunderstanding by those people about what social conservatism is. You don't just, if you're a Christian and you're a believing Christian, you could be a social conservative and not be, for example, Baptist.
Correct. I mean,
and that's the disconnect too. So I think almost all conservatives could be social conservatives.
Here's a perfect example of, again, the left owning that type of a narrative, where when you hear the phrase social conservative in political circles, what's the first person that you think about? The first person that most people think about when you talk about social conservatism, Rick Santorum.
Yep.
Actually, Mike Huckabee for me, but
even Mike Huckabee, but Rick Santorum would be definitely the one. He would be on the short list.
I think Huckabee right now, Gerald, honestly, because he just has more visibility. As far as the majority of people will see him on Fox or see him, you know what I mean? So yeah, politically Santorum, right? Uh-huh.
But when Rick was running, he was always being tagged as a social conservative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and even when he's not running, he's making these speeches, he's shaking hands, kissing baby. He's being a politician, even though he doesn't have political office. He's still being tagged as a social conservative.
Well, I believe that's a label that he embraces too.
He does embrace that, and I understand that. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the kind of thing that people look at, and it's kind of like, they feel it's almost as embraceable as the bubonic plague. Because they see Rick Santorum and like, no, I don't want to be like him.
Well, the problem, if you want to go into a little more detail, Santorum, the problem is, maybe he's socially conservative, but he's not conservative fiscally.
No, he's fiscal liberal.
And that's going to turn people, right, he's going to turn people off because of that too.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I'm leading to, is the fact that, he's socially conservative, but he's fiscally a liberal. When you have even like there was a congressman that was in my district, Tom Campbell, who was the exact opposite. He was fiscally conservative, but socially he's a liberal. Mm. But you're not either. The point is that you're not a conservative, because, again, your politics does not define your religion or your belief system. Your belief system defines your politics. And that's the thing you have to, and the thing, but it's not a litmus test in so much of saying, okay, if you don't believe the Bible, you are not a social conservative. It's like, no, it's like, There are certain things that every human being has that they understand is right and wrong. Now, usually, it's going to line up with Scripture most of the time. If you're intellectually honest, and this is where most Americans do not want to go, liberal or conservative. They don't want to be intellectually honest, because if they do, they will find the failures and the flaws within themselves, and now will have the duty to correct them.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they don't want to correct them is because of their own pride. They feel that they must be right at all cost. And this is why we have to understand what we believe, why we believe it, and enforce those beliefs on those that say they represent us.
It's a good point. That's a great point. If they use the word conservative. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I'm saying if we really want to go out here and understand why we, that there is no such thing as liberal or social conservative versus physical conservative, that's just conservative. And does your conservative view reflect A, what the founders believe, and B, what it reflects in Scripture? If the answer to yes to both of them, then more than likely you're a conservative. If not, you're something else other than. And now you have the obligation to either correct what you're saying or embrace what you're saying. I don't care which one you do, but come to the table intellectually honest. That's my requirement.
Now, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question, because and this is something I am actually kind of curious about. What about those who are both fiscally conservative and socially conservative, and they say, but you know something, I don't believe in a God.
Okay, now here would be the question. If you're going by my criteria of conservatism, the definition of conservatism would be that you understand, identify, and believe what the founders said. And then when you research what the founders said, that they point to Scripture as their authority, how could you not believe in a God? At that point, you have to ask yourself, do you really believe what the founder believed? Are you not being intellectually honest with A, yourself, and B, with me? No different than a trial. You have to go back to original intent.
Mm-hmm.
So if George Washington is saying that it's impossible to rightly govern without God and the Bible, if John Adams is saying that this Constitution is designed for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the degree of any other, when you have those type of men making those type of statements, and you don't go out here and at least subscribe to what they say, then you now have to ask yourself, is how conservative are you? And more importantly, how intellectually dishonest are you? This is true serum, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to go out here and give you the truth, straight and no chaser, because you had that in the bar. Now you're going to get it here.
Unless you don't really drink.
Taylor.
Even if you're drinking water, how do you take it? Straight and no chaser.
But, you know, you've got something stronger than water. So that's not really a proper analogy. But
Diet Dr. Pepper?
does have caffeine, so I will give him that. If you drink enough of it.
Oh my goodness. But do you understand what I'm saying, Taylor?
I get where you're coming from. I'm not sure I agree 100%.
Okay.
But I understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
I think one of the things that when you look at some of the founders, whether it's Benjamin Franklin, there were questions about, if he was a Christian, if he was deist, if he was an atheist. No one really knew. If you look at Thomas Jefferson, there is some debate there about Thomas Jefferson. I know that Patrick Henry was Anglican, but
right.
Very much believed in personal freedom and
yes.
religious freedom.
Yes. Now, to get to citing Benjamin Franklin, because most people who don't want any type of religious discussion coming in there always cite Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. They cite them as being, quote, the least religious, close quote, of the founders. Well, I would submit this. Benjamin Franklin said at the opening of the Constitutional Convention, he said, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor, he said, as it is written in the sacred writings, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman watches over in vain. That's a direct quote out of Psalm 127, verse 1. Now, the question you now have to ask is, why would somebody who believes in a godlike force, which is what deism is, would then go and give the opening invocation about the God of the Bible? That doesn't make sense to me.
I think it doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
So
they're sitting there just going, we're not sure there. They were surprised by it. I had a teacher in the Baptist school that I went to in high school was like, yeah, he said this, but we're kind of surprised that he said that.
Why? Why would we be surprised? Unless we now have to go ahead and rethink what we believe about the guy that's on the $100 bill. And he maybe indeed was a Christian, and we just didn't really want to think about it. We wanted to go ahead and suppress that for whatever reason. We want to go out here and we have our own little, whatever we want to call it, our own little agenda to say that Benjamin Franklin was this and Thomas Jefferson was that and Patrick Henry was the other, and not really wanting to get to the truth of the matter and say that this guy could be a Christian after all. Now, he may not have been a strong one, but strength in the faith is not the discussion. The discussion is, was he or was he not? If he was, we now have to rethink what we believe in the founding fathers. And if we have to rethink what we believe in the founding fathers, we now have to go out here and be intellectually honest that our faith does shape our politics. And if they're shaping them in the wrong way, we now have to be more intellectually honest and say, am I going the wrong way, or do I really need to rethink my theology? Which goes back to rebellion, which is really an offshoot of pride. Mm-hmm. Now you help me out, Taylor.
I don't claim to know anything.
I didn't say you claim to know anything. didn't claim that. I'm just saying all I'm asking is that, does that line of logic sounds agreeable to you?
Yeah, I think you have points. I do think you have points. What I am curious about is, okay, you make the comments when it comes to religion, and when it comes to faith, and when it comes to and being conservative and stuff like that. I guess my question is, if you have I'll use Leland Yee as an example. Okay, I'll use the bill that he pushed for as an example.
Right.
The making it a crime to sell a video game to a minor. Is that something that really should be done? Should a law like that exist?
No, and let me explain to you the reason why. The reason why a law like that should not exist is because a law like that is a reflection of the culture. And it doesn't get into honesty as we understand it through not only just biblical truth, but just truth in general. Because what we're saying, because by this type of a law being passed, what we're saying is that we as a society is advocating or abandoning our responsibility of taking care of the culture to the government.
Yeah.
The government is responsible to take care of any type of domestic problems or international problems. So, in other words, if an invasion comes, if we're dealing with trade, if we're dealing with those are not cultural issues. Those are political issues.
Mm-hmm.
The moment we allow government to step out of the political realm and into the cultural realm, we have a problem, because now government is changing the culture instead of culture changing the government.
Okay, here's my next question. Here is my next, because I'm with you. But here's my next question, and of course it's one that everybody likes to ask. You probably know where I'm going.
Sure.
A federal law banning gay marriage, or a federal law establishing gay marriage.
Okay. What about it?
Which is right?
I would say the state law. Well, let's put it this way. We first have to define what marriage is.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage is a cultural issue. So what's supposed to influence? Is the government supposed to influence the culture, or the culture is supposed to influence the government? That's your first question.
Mm-hmm.
Second question, concerning gay marriage. I know in California, where it is illegal to have gay marriage, and I can prove that, and I'll do that in just a moment. It is the responsibility of the culture to enforce what they want on the government. Now, that being said, you'd have to go back into Proposition 8. Now, Proposition 8, as most people understand it, well, let me rephrase that. Proposition 8, as it is written, which is not the way most people understand it. It's written in this manner. Quote, only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in the state of California. Period. That is in Article 1, Section 7.5 of the California Constitution, Article California Family Code, Section 308.5. That's what it says. Those 13 words, that's Proposition 8. That's all it is. You don't hear that on the news. You don't see that on the television, but that's what it is. And the reason why it's part of the California Constitution is because the state Supreme Court tried to legislate from the bench and overturn the will of the people. So the will of the people had to go out here and put a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and it passed so that the California State Supreme Court cannot meddle into the affairs of the culture of the state.
Right.
And the reason
federally?
why,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Not to cut in, but I think Taylor was asking about a federal part.
Well, I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. But I have to go ahead and give a little background. Now, as far as a federal mandate, again, is the culture dictating what the government says, or is the state dictating to the culture on what it wants? I think that based on the fact that you have the culture in one state saying this, and that this type of thing is understood as being a universal truth, then yes, the reason why there has to be a federal law established is because there is being so much pushback from the other states trying to go out here and dictate a something that flies in the face of what people call, quote, normal. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I will respectfully disagree, but this is why.
Okay.
I look at it from maybe I am an extremely archaic person. I look at it as an agreement between two people and God. Marriage.
Okay.
Man and a woman. If you go by what the Bible says, it's a man and a woman and God.
Okay.
Or I look at it as an agreement between two people.
Okay.
Or two families.
Okay.
With the government's role not in, with there being no role in the of the government.
Okay.
To get involved in that.
Okay.
So I don't think the government should be involved in it at all.
Okay. Now,
and if you want to change people's minds on it, you then have individual like-minded groups get together and start promoting why they don't think it should be this way, completely separate from the government. Right,
instead of having courts overturn what if there's if the people in a state have decided they want to have marriage be defined a certain way, yeah, I don't think a court should come in and change that.
No,
because that's the government affecting it. Yeah,
but remember, the government is supposed to be a reflection of the culture. So that being said, we now have to ask ourselves the original intent. Going right back to what I'm saying, what is the original intent of marriage? The original intent of marriage is to establish a bond that God approves of, because remember, in your argument, you're saying that it's between two people and God, you now have to ask yourself this one question. If most liberals who say that love is love and it really doesn't matter because God is love, well, then you have to ask this question. We all understand how a marriage between a man and a woman gets consummated. That's how we all got here. Here's the question. How does marriage between two men are consummated? Because the consummation process is part of the marriage. Doesn't matter where you go. Consummation process is part of it. How do two men consummate a marriage? Now you're getting into Leviticus 18:22. And now you have a problem. Because it's no longer, because then you're now going out here and you're now taking God completely out of the picture, which flies in the face of what our founders intended. Are you with me?
Right, I hear you.
No, I was speaking to Taylor.
Oh, I understand.
I see where you're coming from.
Okay, so if it flies in the face of the founders, and you call yourself conservative, then you now have to ask yourself, how can you be in favor of a cultural act that flies in the face of what Scripture says is an abomination that the founders believed also?
I actually call myself a libertarian, so.
Oh, I understand that. I kind of already figured that one out.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
It's an interesting thing. It's very interesting, the questions that we have, the differences that we have here on the right.
Absolutely. That's why we can go out here and we can discuss them on a forum such as True Serum. Speaking of which, that is going to be all the time that we're going to have today. Tune in next week where I will give you another dose of Truth Serum, where the Doctor of Truth is always in. For Becca, Laura, and Taylor, my name is Gerald Harrison, and we will see you next time on the radio.
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of panelists and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media, the host, or anyone else.